Hello everyone, I am sleep-friendly ghost stories teller. The rain falls softly tonight. A steady rhythm, calm, familiar. As if each drop is tapping gently on the window of history. And I want you to settle in. Find a comfortable place. Let your breathing slow down. And allow the quiet hush of the rain to wrap around you like a warm blanket. Tonight, we step into a different side of history. Not wars, not kings, not grand battles. But something much quieter. Something that lingers in the stillness. Long after people, time, and even memory have begun to fade. We explore the stories of ghosts. Not frightening ones. Not the ones that jump out from behind shadows. But the ones tied gently to real history. The ones whose stories were so heavy. So full of emotion. That some say they continued to echo long after their last breath. These tales are slow. Soft. Calm. Perfect for drifting to sleep. Perfect for letting your mind loosen its grip on the day. So let the rain guide you. Let your shoulders relax. Let the world outside fade for a while. Tonight, we begin with a queen whose life was filled with love, danger, betrayal, and tragedy. A woman whose memory has survived for nearly 500 years. And whose ghost, they say, still wanders the ancient stones of the Tower of London. This is the quiet, lingering story of Anne Boleyn. Rain continues, gentle, soothing. Ghost Story 1, The Ghost of Anne Boleyn. The tragic Queen of England. The early 1500s in England was a world of ambition, whispers, and tremendous change. Imagine the vast halls of Tudor palaces. Heavy tapestries on the walls. Guards with halberds. Soft candlelight flickering against stone. And the hushed conversations of nobles. Always careful. Always watching. Into this world stepped a young woman named Anne Boleyn. Unlike many queens, Anne was not born into royalty. She came from a noble but not royal family. She was educated in the courts of Europe. Speaking French, learning music, poetry, diplomacy. Skills rare for a woman of her time. People said she wasn't the most conventionally beautiful. But she had something far more captivating. Intelligence, charm, wit, and a striking presence. That pulled attention toward her like a magnet. When Anne returned to England, she entered the court of King Henry VIII. A king powerful, passionate, and accustomed to always getting what he wanted. At first, Anne was simply another lady in waiting. But slowly, the king noticed her. She refused to become his mistress. She refused to give him her affection lightly. And this resistance made Henry want her even more. To win her, Henry VIII did something that shook the entire world. He separated the Church of England from the Catholic Church. He defied the Pope. He reshaped the religion of his kingdom. Just to marry Anne Boleyn. But power gained through turmoil rarely rests peacefully. And struggled to provide Henry with a son. Court politics twisted around her like vines. Jealous rivals, scheming nobles. And a king whose affection began to cool. As rapidly as it had once burned. Whispers turned to accusations. Accusations turned to charges. And in May of 1536, Anne was arrested and taken to the Tower of London. The tower was already ancient then. Its massive walls thick with centuries of silence. Stories of prisoners who arrived but never left. And secrets locked behind iron doors. Anne, once the most powerful woman in England, was now a prisoner awaiting trial. Witnesses from that time wrote that she was calm. During those last days, she prayed. She spoke softly with her ladies. She maintained her dignity. Even as everything she had fought for collapsed around her like broken stone. On the morning of her execution, Anne stepped out onto the scaffold built for her. The sky was pale. The air held a strange stillness. Even the birds, they say, were silent. She gave a short speech, forgiving those who condemned her, and praying for the king's long life. Then she knelt. A French swordsman brought especially for her, because Henry wanted the death to be quick, raised his blade, and in a single, swift motion, Anne Boleyn's life ended. But her story did not. Fog the hauntings of the Tower. The Tower of London is many things. A fortress, a palace, a prison, a museum. But above all, it is a place where memory holds tight. For centuries, people have claimed that Anne Boleyn never fully left those cold stone walls. Night guards spoke of seeing a woman dressed in Tudor-era clothing, walking slowly across the courtyard. Sometimes she appeared whole, sometimes with a calmness almost unnerving. She was seen carrying her severed head, cradled in her arms like a tragic relic of her fate. One guard, in the late 1800s, reported seeing her ghost pass through a locked door, before dissolving into thin air. He was so shaken by the encounter that he left his post immediately, and never returned. Visitors who stayed in the Queen's house, a beautiful timber building inside the tower, claimed they heard soft footsteps on the stairs, when no one else was inside. Others spoke of a faint rustle of fabric, as if a long, elegant gown had brushed past them in an empty hallway. Some said they felt a sudden coldness, not frightening, but deeply sad, as though someone nearby carried a sorrow too heavy to fade. In the chapel of St. Peter at Vincula, where Anne is buried beneath the stones, tourists have described feeling an overwhelming sense of melancholy the moment they enter, a heaviness that sits on the chest, a quiet grief that lingers long after they leave the chapel. Even the ravens of the tower, famous for their connection to British legend, sometimes act strangely when near Anne Boleyn's burial spot, tilting their heads as if watching something unseen. Cloud with rain, a calm reflection. When we think about ghosts, we often imagine fear, shadows, panic. But Anne Boleyn's ghost, according to centuries of sightings, is different. There is no malice, no threat, only presence. A quiet, dignified reminder of a life cut tragically short. A symbol of how deeply a human story can anchor itself to a place. Perhaps ghosts remain, not because they want to frighten, but because they still have something to say. Something unfinished, something unresolved. Anne's life was a whirlwind. Love, danger, ambition, downfall, death. All in a mere few years. Her haunting, if it is real, is not a scream into the night, but a whisper through the centuries. A whisper that says, I was here. I mattered. And I am not forgotten. As the gentle rain continues to fall, let the echoes fade softly, letting the Tower of London drift from our thoughts, like mist dissolving into night. And now, with calm steps, we move from England, across the ocean, to the quiet fields of Pennsylvania, a place where soldiers long gone are said to march again, through the fog of Gettysburg. The Lost Soldiers of Gettysburg. Calm, boring history ghost story, USA audience, rain ambience. Soft rain continues, distant thunder hums gently in the background. The rain tonight falls with a quiet persistence, much like the memories that cling to the fields of Gettysburg. If you listen closely, each drop feels like a footstep, a gentle echo of the thousands who marched there, more than a century and a half ago. This story is not loud, not dramatic. It's slow, heavy, and deeply human. A story of men who left home, never to return. A story of the land that remembers them, even when the world tried to move on. Tonight, we walk softly through the calm but haunted history of Gettysburg. Sheaf of Rice, the battle that changed everything. Before the ghost stories emerge, we need to understand the place itself. Gettysburg, a quiet rural town in Pennsylvania. In 1863, it was nothing more than farmland, rolling hills, and a few dirt roads. But in July of that year, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, something happened here that would change the destiny of the United States forever. The Battle of Gettysburg. More than 160,000 soldiers from the Union and Confederate armies clashed across these fields. For 3 days, the air was filled with gunfire, screams, smoke, and chaos. Families hid in their basements as cannon blasts shook their homes. At the battle's end, over 50,000 were dead, wounded, or missing. 50,000 lives gone or shattered in just 3 days. When the armies moved on, the fields remained silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that sits heavy in the air. A silence that feels alive. It's this silence that gave birth to the stories. Fog, a land that remembers. When people talk about Gettysburg today, they often mention something strange. Something almost impossible to describe. A feeling. A heaviness. A sense of being watched. Not in a threatening way, but in a sorrowful, lingering way. Visitors walk across the fields and suddenly feel cold, even on hot summer days. Others say they hear distant marching, drums, or a quiet voice calling out in the wind. And many, many witnesses claim to have seen soldiers. Not reenactors, not tourists, but figures from another time. Silent, still, observing, lost between the world that was and the world that is. Ghostly encounters around Gettysburg. Over the past 150+ years, there have been hundreds, actually thousands, of ghost sightings recorded in this place. Most are calm, some are eerie, but almost all are filled with a soft sadness. Tonight, we explore them slowly, softly, letting the rain guide us through the stories. Sheaf of Rice 1. The Soldier on the Ridge. On Seminary Ridge, where Confederate soldiers once held their line, visitors frequently report seeing a lone man standing at the edge of the tree line. He wears a faded gray uniform. His shoulders slump slightly, as if weighed down by exhaustion. He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He doesn't even seem aware of the people watching him. Several park rangers, men and women trained to look for trespassers, have approached him over the years. Every time, as they get closer, the figure simply fades. Not running, not hiding, just dissolving, like mist in the rain. Some believe he is a soldier, searching for his unit, not knowing the battle, his army, and his entire world, ended long ago. Sheaf of Rice 2. The woman in the field hospital. The Lutheran seminary served as a field hospital during and after the battle. Hundreds of wounded men were carried through its doors. Surgeons worked for days, with no rest. The floors were soaked with blood. Cries and prayers filled the air. It was a place of unimaginable pain. Today, visitors report seeing a woman in old-fashioned clothing, a Civil War era nurse, walking calmly through the halls. She carries a candle. Her expression is soft, gentle, focused. Witnesses say she moves with purpose, as if tending to patients. Only she can see. She never reacts to modern voices. never acknowledges visitors. She simply fades into the dim light. A nurse who kept working long after the war ended, long after she herself was gone. Fog 3. The Phantom Regiment. This is one of the most famous and most documented hauntings in Gettysburg. Late one evening in the 1970s, a group of government workers were fixing a broken fence near the triangular field, one of the bloodiest spots of the battle. Suddenly, they heard drumming, then marching, rhythmic, slow, steady. The men stopped working and listened. From the fog came a line of soldiers in full Union uniforms. Their blue coats looked strangely clean. Their rifles glinted in the low light. Their faces were calm, emotionless, almost hollow. The workers shouted, thinking it was a reenactment. No response. The soldiers marched right past them, not touching the ground, not disturbing the grass. Their feet made no sound, and as they reached the far edge of the field, they vanished. Not into the trees, not behind a hill, just gone. The men reported the incident immediately. They were shaken, but not frightened, just confused by what they had seen. Even today, that story is one of Gettysburg's most credible ghost reports. Chief of Rice 4. The Boy with the Drum. Many battles during the Civil War used child drummers, boys as young as 12 or 13, who marched with the army to signal commands. One such boy, a young drummer in the Union ranks, is said to wander near Culp's Hill. Visitors describe hearing soft drumming at dusk, a heartbeat-like rhythm, gentle, steady, melancholic. Sometimes they see him, a small figure in a blue uniform, barefoot, holding a drum lightly at his side. He never looks up, never speaks, just stands quietly, as if waiting for orders that will never come. Some believe he is searching for his father, another soldier who died at Gettysburg. Others think the boy never left the battlefield because it was the last place he felt he had purpose. Whatever the reason, his presence is calm, not fearful, just endlessly sad. Cloud with rain, the land that doesn't forget. There's a unique quietness to the Gettysburg fields. Not emptiness, not desolation, but a fullness of memory. People who visit often describe the same feeling, as if they are never entirely alone, not watched, not endangered, just observed, standing on Little Round Top. Many have said they felt a hand on their shoulder, a gentle touch, not cold, almost guiding, as if someone from another time was trying to show them something. A moment, a memory, a fragment of what once happened there. Others walking through the wheat field report hearing whispers, soft, distant, like men talking quietly, just beyond reach. In Devil's Den, a rocky outcrop that saw fierce fighting, photographers for decades have captured strange figures in their photos. Men in uniforms who weren't visible when the picture was taken. Many skeptics try to explain these away. But even when logic tries to speak, the land itself holds the final word. Gettysburg is a place where history is not just written, but felt. A place where memory did not fade. A place where thousands left part of themselves behind. Fog, a calm goodbye to the battlefield. As the rain continues to fall, softly against the fields. We pause. And breathe. Imagine the quiet hills of Gettysburg. After the armies left. No gunfire. No shouting. No drums. Just wind. Grass. Distant birds. And over everything. A profound silence. The kind of silence that doesn't erase what happened, but holds it gently. Like a fragile memory. Preserved in time. The ghost stories of Gettysburg are not frightening. They're mournful. Reflective. Human. Echoes of men who never went home. Whose stories ended abruptly. Whose final moments were spent far from family and warmth. Maybe they walk the fields because the land remembers them. Maybe they linger because they have nowhere else to go. Or maybe these stories exist to remind us that every life lost was a world lost. Tonight, we leave Gettysburg softly, letting the echoes fade into the rain, and we journey next to the quiet, drifting halls of a haunted ship off the coast of California, a vessel known today as one of the most haunted places in America, the RMS Queen Mary, the haunted Queen Mary ship. Rain continues softly, a gentle rumble of distant thunder. A slow ocean-like ambience fades in, low, comforting, rhythmic. Tonight, we drift from the fields of Gettysburg to the Pacific coast of California, where an enormous silent ship rests in Long Beach Harbor. A ship retired from the sea, yet never entirely silent, never entirely empty. The RMS Queen Mary, a grand ocean liner, a wartime troop ship, a floating city of memories, some bright, some heavy, some that linger in ways even time cannot explain. This is not a frightening story. It is a slow one, a quiet one, a story of footsteps in empty halls, shadows that move with purpose, and echoes of a ship that refuses to be forgotten. Tonight, we walk gently through the Queen Mary ship, the grand beginning. The RMS Queen Mary was born in the 1930s, a time of glamour, ocean travel, and towering engineering ambitions. Built in Scotland, she was designed to be one of the greatest ships ever created. And she was nearly 1,020 feet long, heavier than the Titanic, faster than almost any ship of her era. Inside, she had everything. Ballrooms with crystal chandeliers, dining rooms with polished silver, luxurious staterooms, thick carpets, and elegant staircases that curved softly, like the flow of ocean waves. Passengers who sailed on her described the experience as magical, a floating palace. But as her life unfolded, the Queen Mary carried far more than wealthy travelers and suitcases. She carried secrets. She carried sorrow. And perhaps, she carried spirits. Anchor the wartime transformation. When World War II erupted, the Queen Mary's luxury was stripped away. The chandeliers were removed. The carpets pulled up. The elegant furniture taken out. Painted in dull gray. She became the Grey Ghost. A fast, silent, invisible troop ship, capable of carrying more than 15,000 soldiers at once. Her decks echoed not with music, but with marching boots. Her cabins became bunk rooms. Her ballrooms became medical wards. She carried thousands of young men across dangerous waters, many heading to war, never to return home. The Queen Mary witnessed fear, hope, injuries, and heartbreak. And some say, the memories of those years still walk the ship today. The hauntings began early. When the war ended, and the ship returned to civilian service. Crew members began reporting strange occurrences. Soft footsteps in empty corridors. Doors opening on their own. Voices where no one stood. Cold gusts of air. In small, enclosed rooms. Passengers whispered stories. Of shadows standing quietly at the end of hallways. Or watching from staircases. Before fading into nothing. No one knew the cause. Some believed it was the ship adjusting. After years of transformation. Others thought the Queen Mary had simply absorbed too many memories. But over time, the stories grew more specific, more detailed, more difficult to ignore. The ghosts of the Queen Mary. Calm, slow, soft-spoken retellings. Tonight, we explore them gently. One presence at a time. Gear 1. The engine room, door 13. Perhaps the most famous spirit on the Queen Mary is a young man often called John. In the 1960s, a crew member was crushed by a massive watertight door, door 13, during a safety drill. He died instantly, and ever since, people have reported seeing a young man in blue coveralls walking near the engine room. His appearance is brief, never dramatic, never frightening. Witnesses say he walks calmly, as though still performing his duties, checking pipes, inspecting the machinery, glancing toward the door that ended his life. Some see him clearly, others feel a presence, a sudden coldness, a soft tingling sensation, a faint smell of engine oil. When no one else is there, tour guides slowing their groups near door 13 often describe a quiet pressure in the air. Not heavy, not threatening, just present, like someone is standing nearby, listening. Person in bed 2. Stateroom B340, the most infamous cabin. Stateroom B340 is known as the Queen Mary's most troubled room. Over the decades, guests staying in this cabin reported unusual experiences. Blankets pulled off during the night. Faucets turning on by themselves. Lights flickering. Drawers sliding open slowly. Soft knocking on the walls. Whispers so faint they could be mistaken for dreams. One guest claimed they woke to see a man standing at the foot of their bed. Still, silent. Dressed in old-fashioned clothing. When they blinked, he was gone. Today, B340 is empty. Furnished only for tours. Not for overnight stays. Without special arrangement. Inside the room, the air feels different. Cooler. Heavier. As if many stories overlap at once. Not frightening. Just quietly unsettled. A place where memories linger. Longer than they should. Person swimming 3. The first-class swimming pool. The ship has 2 massive pools. But the first-class pool is the one people speak of most. It is empty now. No water. No swimmers. Just old tiles. And echoes of the past. In the early days after retirement, staff reported hearing splashes in the empty pool, footsteps running along the deck, and laughter of women who were not there. Some saw wet footprints appear on the tile floors, even though no water existed in the room. A few witnesses, including security guards, claimed they saw a woman in a 1930s bathing suit standing near the edge of the pool, looking down as if preparing to dive. When approached, she simply vanished. No sound. No movement. Only silence. As if she were nothing more then a memory replaying itself. Across a dry, forgotten room. Door 4. The Lady in White. One of the ship's calmest spirits. Is known simply as the Lady in White. She appears in the old salons and promenade areas. A tall woman, in a long white evening gown, gliding gently through the air. Witnesses say her presence is peaceful, almost comforting. Sometimes she stands near the staircase, slowly turning her head, as though listening to distant music. Music that perhaps only she can hear. Her expression is serene, not sorrowful, like other spirits. She seems content, lost in a memory of a night long past. Some believe she was once a ballroom dancer who loved the ship and never wanted to leave. Others think she is a symbolic presence, not one soul, but the collective memory of all the elegance the Queen Mary held. Whatever she is, her presence remains gentle, graceful, like a soft echo of a dance that never ended. Fog, the ship that breathes with memory. People often say the Queen Mary feels alive, even when empty. The air hums softly, pipes settling, wood expanding, metal cooling. But some sounds don't match the ship's mechanics. Footsteps in hallways with no one walking. Soft voices in rooms sealed for decades. A distant knock echoing down corridors, far from human activity. Security guards, maintenance workers, and hotel staff. People used to navigating the ship alone. All report similar experiences. Not terrifying, not shocking, simply strange. They describe walking into certain sections of the ship and feeling as if they've stepped into another time. The temperature shifts, the air thickens, the lighting seems softer. Footsteps echo differently, as if the ship remembers and wants to share those memories with anyone who is quiet enough to listen. Cloud with rain, a calm reflection. Tonight, as the rain continues outside the story, we think about the Queen Mary, not as a haunted attraction or a place of fear, but as a vessel of history. She carried joy, adventure, excitement. She also carried fear, injury, uncertainty, and thousands of young men headed into war. Every deck, every hallway, every cabin holds a layer of emotion that cannot be erased. Perhaps that's why so many spirits remain, not trapped, not angry, just unwilling to let their stories fade. They walk calmly through the ship they once knew, living their moments again and again. Memories replaying like soft waves against the hull. As we leave the Queen Mary tonight, we let the echoes settle. We let the ship grow quiet, and we drift gently back into the sound of falling rain. Our next journey takes us into the deep forests and misty mountains of Canada, to a grand hotel with a tragic past and a ghostly bride who dances alone. The Ghost Bride of Banff Springs Hotel. A calm, slow, atmospheric, boring history ghost story. Rain continues, gentle, steady, as if tapping softly against a mountain window. The sound of distant wind quietly fades in, cool, high altitude, peaceful. Tonight, we travel north, away from the ocean, away from the battlefields, into the towering Canadian Rockies, a place where pine forests stretch endlessly, and mountains rise like ancient guardians, watching over the world below. Here stands an enormous stone hotel, The Fairmont Banff Springs. Its silhouette looks almost like a castle, nestled deep within Banff National Park. Quiet, majestic, timeless. Some call it the Castle of the Rockies. Others call it one of the most peaceful places on earth. But within its elegant halls and grand staircases, there is a story, gentle, tragic, and lingering. A story of a bride who never left. Tonight, we listen to her calm, sorrowful tale. Not to frighten, but to understand a love that ended before it truly began. Snow-capped mountain. The castle in the mountains. The Banff Springs Hotel opened in 1888. Built by the Canadian Pacific Railway to attract wealthy travelers to the untouched wilderness of Alberta. Imagine the early days. Steam trains arriving with elegant passengers, their luggage carried by porters. The smell of pine in the air, the distant echo of waterfalls in the valley below. At night, the hotel glowed with warm yellow lights, its stone walls radiating comfort against the cold mountain air. Inside, there were lavish dining rooms, polished staircases, and grand windows overlooking the forest. It was a place where people came for rest, celebration, and the beauty of nature. But one celebration did not go as planned, and that is where our story begins. Bride with Veil. The bride and her wedding day. In the early 1900s, though the exact year remains blurred by time, a young bride prepared for her wedding inside one of the hotel's elegant rooms. She was described as beautiful, graceful, kind, with dark hair styled delicately, and a white gown that flowed like snow down a mountain slope. The entire hotel buzzed with happiness. Staff hurried through the halls, guests dressed in their finest clothing. Musicians tuned their instruments. Flowers were placed carefully along the curved staircase. The bride descended the stairs to join her ceremony, a moment she had dreamed of for months, maybe years. But fate, quiet and unpredictable, intervened as she stepped gracefully downward. Her long wedding dress brushed against one of the open candles that lined the staircase. The fabric caught fire. In an instant, panicked, she tried to lift the gown, but the flames spread too quickly. Overwhelmed by fear, she stumbled and fell down the stairs. She died just moments before her wedding was meant to begin. A life cut short, not by malice, not by tragedy of war, but by the quiet cruelty of an accident. Born from celebration, her groom was devastated, her family heartbroken. The hotel's joy turned into a still, heavy silence. And over time, the story faded into legend. But some say the bride did not ghost. The bride in the staircase. For over a century, guests and staff have reported seeing a woman in a flowing white gown standing at the top of the very staircase where the tragedy occurred. She does not scream. She does not cry. She simply stands quietly, peacefully, as if waiting for something or someone. Some witnesses say she appears only as a soft silhouette. Others claim they see her face clearly, calm, serene, with a faint sadness in her eyes. A few guests have watched as she begins to glide down the stairs in a graceful movement that seems almost like dancing, only to vanish halfway down the very place where her life was taken. Housekeepers walking at night have reported smelling faint smoke or warm candle wax near the staircase. when no candles were lit, and no guests were nearby. Tourists have captured misty forms in photographs taken along the stairs. White, flowing shapes curve gently, like fabric in motion. Her presence is not frightening. It is simply deeply sad, as if she is repeating the moment she never finished, descending the stairs to her wedding, again and again, forever suspended between hope and heartbreak. Woman dancing, the bride who dances alone. The bride is not limited to the staircase. Many have claimed to see her in the hotel's grand ballroom, a beautiful, echoing space with tall windows and polished floors that glow under soft lighting. Late at night, when the ballroom is empty and the lights are low, staff have heard a faint rustling, like the gentle swish of a wedding dress moving across the floor. Others have heard soft classical music drifting through the empty room, even when no speakers were on and no musicians were present. And some have actually seen her, a woman in white, dancing slowly in the middle of the ballroom, her movements graceful, delicate, as though she is dancing the first dance she never had. She spins softly, glides, pauses, and when someone enters, she simply fades, like a reflection dissolving in rippling water, not abruptly, not in fear, but peacefully, as if slipping into a memory only she can hear. Candle, the tragedy room. Some stories place the bride in one particular room of the hotel, a room thought to have belonged to her on the night before the wedding. Guests who stay in this room have reported the faint sound of soft footsteps, a gentle tug at their blankets at night, the smell of smoke, a feeling of someone sitting at the foot of their bed, a calm, cold breeze moving through the room, even when the windows are shut. One woman claimed she woke up to see a figure standing near the vanity mirror, a woman brushing her hair softly, as brides do when preparing for a ceremony. The witness blinked slowly, thinking she was dreaming. When she opened her eyes again, the woman had vanished. Another guest, a man who knew nothing of the legend, reported being woken by the quiet sound of a woman crying, a gentle, mournful sound, barely louder than a whisper. When he turned on the light, the room was empty. These stories are not violent, not dramatic. They are calm, filled with sadness, echoes of a life interrupted. Dove, why she stays? Ghost stories often ask, why does the spirit remain? For the bride of Banff Springs, the answer seems soft, simple, and deeply human. She was preparing for the happiest moment of her life, a moment she never reached. Her joy, her excitement, her anticipation, all became frozen in the instant of her fall. Perhaps she lingers to finish the walk down the stairs she never completed. Perhaps she dances in the ballroom to feel the celebration she was denied. Perhaps she returns to her room to relive a night filled with hope for a future she never received. Or perhaps, after all these years, she is simply waiting for the groom who once waited for her, not as horror, but as memory, not as fear, but as love unfinished. Cloud with rain, a calm goodbye to the bride. As the rain continues outside, we leave the Banff Springs Hotel. As gently as we entered it, we remember the bride, not as a ghost of terror, but as a symbol of life paused in its most beautiful moment. Her story is soft, tragic, lonely, but peaceful. A reminder that places hold memories just as strongly as people do. And sometimes, when a moment is powerful enough, it echoes forever. Tonight, as we step back into the sound of rain, we let her dance fade softly, her gown fluttering like a whisper in the mountains. Our next journey takes us south to the haunted corners of New Orleans, Louisiana, where history, culture, and tragedy blend together into ghostly stories unlike anywhere else in America. The Wailing Woman of New Orleans. A calm, slow, emotional, boring history ghost story. Rain continues softly, but now, the ambience blends with a low, distant hum. The sort of humid night air found in the American South. A faint echo of a riverboat horn drifts by, slow, low, atmospheric. Tonight, we travel to the American South. To a place unlike any other in the country. A place where the air is thick. The streets are filled with stories. And the past breathes as deeply as the present. New Orleans. A city of jazz and sorrow. Celebration and tragedy. Mystery and memory. A city where the history is so rich, so layered, that some say even the ghosts become part of the culture. And among all its haunted stories, from old mansions to misty cemeteries, one tale stands quietly in the shadows. A woman, a loss too great to fade, and a wail that drifts through the night, when the rain begins to fall. Tonight, we listen gently to the soft, mournful story of the Wailing Woman of New Orleans. Waxing crescent moon, the city of echoes. Before we meet her, we must understand the place she inhabits. New Orleans is not a typical American city. It is a mosaic of cultures. French, Spanish, African, Caribbean, woven together for centuries. It is a city of wrought iron balconies, colorful houses, quiet courtyards with flowing fountains, and narrow streets torch-lit at night. It is a place where music floats freely, where meals last hours, and where the Mississippi River flows like a giant vein of memory through the heart of the city. But behind the beauty lies a long history. Floods, fires, epidemics, heartbreaks. The city has seen joy, and it has seen extraordinary pain. Perhaps that is why its ghost stories feel so deeply emotional. They are not tales of terror, but of sorrow, love, loss, lingering emotion. And one of the most enduring is that of the Wailing Woman. Candle her home, the old French Quarter. Her story begins in the French Quarter, the oldest neighborhood in New Orleans. Here, the streets are narrow. Lamplight flickers warmly, and old Creole townhouses stand like silent witnesses to centuries of life. In one such house, simple yet elegant, lived a young Creole woman. In the early 1800s, her name has been lost to time. Some say she was called Marie. Others say Amelie. Most simply call her the Wailing Woman. She lived quietly in a two-story home with bright shutters and a small courtyard. Her life was unremarkable to most, except for one thing. She was deeply, painfully in love. Her fiancé was a sailor who traveled up and down the Mississippi, carrying goods between the Gulf of Mexico and the inland cities. Every time he left, she waited by the window, watching the river, hoping to see his boat return. And every time he came back, their embrace filled the house with joy. Their wedding was planned. Their future was set. Everything was perfect. Until the night the storm came. Cloud with rain the night of the storm. One humid evening. Thunder rolled low in the sky. The Mississippi churned dark and restless. Wind rattled the shutters. And the rain fell. In heavy, relentless sheets. Her fiancé's boat was expected that night. But the storm was growing stronger, fiercer, swallowing the horizon. In darkness and water, the young woman lit a candle and placed it in the window. A guiding light, a beacon for her love. As he approached the city, hours passed. No boat. Midnight came. Still, no boat. She waited, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the river, as lightning flashed intermittently through the sky. Finally, a knock came at the door. But it was not him. It was a sailor from a neighboring vessel, drenched, solemn, his hat in his hands. He told her the boat had capsized in the storm. Most of the crew had been lost, including her fiancé. The candle in the window still flickered softly, but the man it was meant to guide was gone. She collapsed to the floor, her heart breaking, with a sound deeper than the thunder outside. And from that moment on, her life changed. She withdrew from the world, refusing visitors, barely eating, barely sleeping. Her neighbors heard her crying, sometimes softly, sometimes so deeply that the sound echoed through the courtyard walls. Until one morning, they found her upstairs in her room, still, gone. A life consumed by grief, as powerful as the storm that took the man she loved. Ghost the Whale begins. Soon after her death, strange things began happening in the French Quarter. Late at night, when the streets were empty and the rain fell heavily, neighbors would hear a sound. A woman's cry. Soft at first, like someone mourning quietly. Then louder. A long, aching wail that rose and fell, like the Mississippi's tide. Some described it as the sound of a heart breaking, again and again. Others said it felt more like a prayer, a plea to the storm to return what it had taken. Over the years, people attempted to explain it. The wind, the river, the shifting old buildings. But those who heard it knew it was her, the Wailing woman. Fog sightings through the decades. Her presence is subtle, quiet, almost gentle, but it endures. 1. The window silhouette. Residents and tourists have reported seeing a woman standing in the upstairs window of the old townhouse, her figure framed by candlelight, her head bowed, hands clasped, as though waiting for someone who will never return. When approached, the candle goes out, the figure disappears, the room becomes silent. 2. The riverfront crying. Near the river, especially along the old levee, people walking at night have heard a soft sobbing coming from the water's edge. Sometimes they see a woman kneeling, wearing a long white dress, soaked like rain-soaked cotton. She stares into the river, as though searching for a boat that should be returning, but never will. And when someone speaks to her, she fades, slowly, as if walking backward, into the night. 3. The courtyard footsteps. In the courtyard behind her old home, residents have heard footsteps. Light, hesitant, like someone pacing. They also report the smell of wet river air, even on dry nights. A candle's faint glow, Appears in windows, long shuttered and unused. It is said that she still walks. From window to courtyard. Courtyard to doorway. Repeating the last moments. Before the storm took everything. Cloud with rain, why she wailed. Most ghost stories carry a moment of fear. But hers carries more emotion than terror. She does not seek vengeance. She does not harm. She does not frighten intentionally. She mourns. She mourns the loss of the future she was promised. She mourns the love that never reached her door. She mourns the man who sailed into a storm and never returned. Her wail is not a scream, not a threat. It is heartbreak. The human kind. The quiet, devastating kind. That lingers long after life ends. And the people of New Orleans, with their deep sense of emotion, culture, and history, understand her. Many residents say, she's family now. She's part of us. Part of our story. In a city filled with music, her cry is simply another note. A softer one. A sorrowful one. But a note that belongs. Crescent moon, a calm goodbye to New Orleans. As the rain continues softly, we leave the wailing woman. With gentleness, we imagine her candle flickering quietly in the window, her dress flowing lightly in the humid breeze, her eyes searching the river for a boat that will never return. And though her story is sad, there is beauty in her persistence. A love so strong that even death could not silence it. We let her wail fade into the night. Soft, distant, almost like the cry of a violin, playing a slow, mournful melody. Our next journey takes us west, into the quiet, dark mountains of Colorado, where the ghosts of miners still echo beneath the earth. The Phantom Miners of Colorado. A calm, slow, deeply atmospheric, boring history ghost story. Rain continues softly. But now, beneath it, a new ambience begins to form. A low, distant rumble of mountains. A faint echo of wind slipping through narrow canyons. And the deep, hollow tone of something underground. Something vast and old. Tonight, we leave the humid air of New Orleans and step into the thin, crisp breath of the American West. A place where the sky stretches endlessly overhead, where jagged mountains rise like silent giants, and where the earth holds secrets far below the surface. Colorado, a land of towering peaks, winding mining towns, ghostly trains, and tunnels carved deep into mountains by men searching for fortune or survival. In the late 1800s, Colorado was alive with the sounds of picks hitting rock, steam whistles from ore carts, and the distant clatter of miners descending into darkness, day after day. But where there is such hardship, such struggle, such isolation, ghost stories grow. And among them is one of the calmest, yet eeriest tales of the American West. The Phantom Miners of Colorado. Snow-capped mountain, the gold rush and the silence after. In the mid-1800s, Colorado drew thousands. Men who left their homes with nothing but dreams of striking gold or silver. Mining towns sprang up overnight. Towns like Central City, Black Hawk, Silver Plume, Leadville, and Telluride. By day, these towns roared with life. Saloon music, wagon wheels, steam engines, and men shouting orders. But at night, the mountains swallowed the sound. The wind carried whispers through the valleys, and deep underground tunnels creaked softly. as though the earth itself breathed. Mining was dangerous. Tunnels collapsed. Gas seeped into the air. Explosions took lives instantly. Some miners never returned to the surface. Their bodies remained buried within the labyrinth of tunnels. And their stories lingered. Pick the tunnels that never sleep. Mining tunnels are strange places. Cold, silent, and filled with a sense of something ancient. Even when empty, they seem to hum with memory. Decades after many mines closed, locals began reporting strange encounters. Footsteps echoing in abandoned shafts. Voices murmuring in the dark. Lantern lights drifting through tunnels. With no miners left alive. Most eerie of all, the sound of picks striking stone. Steady, rhythmic, echoing across chambers that have not seen human labor for more than 100 years. Tonight, we enter these tunnels slowly, gently, listening to the stories that echo beneath the Rocky Mountains. Ghost the Phantom Miners of Colorado. Calm, slow, quiet retellings. Fog 1. The Lantern Man of Silver Plume. Silver Plume is a tiny mountain town, nestled against steep cliffs. Its abandoned mines lie just above the old wooden houses. For decades, hikers and locals have reported seeing a single lantern swaying in the darkness of the hills. Not bright, just a gentle, amber glow, moving slowly along the mountain trails. Witnesses say the light moves with purpose, pausing occasionally, as if someone is checking the ground, then continuing along an invisible path. When anyone approaches, the lantern does not flicker. It does not drop. It simply fades, slowly, like a breath dissolving into the night. Old miners claim it is the spirit of a man who once searched for a missing partner. A miner who disappeared after a tunnel collapse more than a century ago. The Lantern Man still looks for him, calmly, endlessly. His glow a reminder of loyalty that outlived his body. Pick 2. The Echoes of Central City. Central City, once called the richest square mile on Earth, is one of Colorado's most haunted places. Inside the old mines, even though the entrances are sealed, locals hear sounds. A distant pickaxe, a shouted instruction, the creak of ore carts, the faint scrape of boots on rock. Not chaotic, not threatening, just steady, rhythmic, as though the workers never ended their shift. Some miners believed the echoes were not ghosts, but the mines themselves, remembering the men who carved them open. Others believed the spirits simply returned to the only home they ever truly knew. Evergreen Tree 3. The miner on the Switchback Trail, near Telluride. A steep mountain trail switches back and forth along a cliff. One early morning, a hiker reported seeing a man in old mining clothes, worn boots, dusty overalls, and a felt hat pulled low. He walked slowly, shoulders heavy, as though returning home. After a long shift, the hiker stepped aside to let him pass. But instead of footsteps, there was silence. When the hiker looked again, the man was gone. No footsteps, no dust disturbed, no sign he had ever been there. Other hikers have seen similar figures. Men walking the trail with quiet determination, faces expressionless, bodies fading into mountain mist. Wind Face 4. The Whispering Shaft of Black Hawk. In Black Hawk, an old mine shaft now collapsed holds one of the softest, yet most unsettling stories. Residents walking by at night have heard whispers. Not words. Not names. Just low, indistinct murmurs. Carried on the cold mountain air. Some nights, the whispers grow clearer. A cough. A sigh. A short, tired laugh. Echoing faintly from deep underground. On rare occasions, a single word emerges. Careful. Or wait. Or below. As if the spirits are still communicating. Still warning each other. As they did in life. The town respects the mine. People do not try to enter or disturb it. They say the whispers are not meant for the living. They are simply echoes from an old world, carved by exhausted hands. Candle 5. The miner who follows the light. This story comes from Leadville, one of the highest towns in America. Perched above 10,000 feet. A security guard once reported seeing a man following him through an old mining museum. The guard carried a flashlight, and as he walked, the faint figure behind him mimicked his steps. Slow, soft, never too close. When the guard turned to ask if he needed help, the figure vanished instantly. But the flashlight beam continued to reflect off something in the air, as though it still shined on a solid form that was no longer visible. Other guards have had similar experiences. A quiet miner following the light, not to scare, not to harm, but perhaps because the light reminds him of lanterns that used to guide him through endless tunnels. Fog. Why the miners linger. Ghosts often stay because of longing, or trauma, or unfinished stories. But the phantom miners of Colorado are different. Most who encounter them describe a sense of peace. A heavy, quiet peace, like the feeling of standing in an empty cathedral. The miners lived underground, day after day, year after year. The tunnels became their world. Dark, dangerous, but familiar. Some believe the spirits simply returned to the only place they ever understood. Others think their routines were so embedded in the rock and earth that even after death, the memory of labor continues without them knowing. They are not trapped, nor restless. They walk the tunnels. They carved. They swing their tools as they once did. They follow lantern light because that is what they always did. Their presence is a reminder of the thousands who risked their lives in pursuit of dreams that the mountains did not always give willingly. Cloud with rain. A calm goodbye to the tunnels. As the rain continues softly outside, we leave Colorado's quiet mountains. Slowly, gently, with respect, we picture the abandoned tunnels. Cool, silent, stretching deep underground. We imagine the faint glow of lanterns moving through stone chambers. Long after the world above forgot the miners who carved them. There is no fear in their story. Only endurance. Hard work. Routine. Lives lived in darkness, with hope of reaching light. Tonight, their echoes fade not in sorrow, but in calm remembrance. And now, as we step back into the sound of rain, we prepare for our next journey. We return east, to the chilling legacy of Salem, Massachusetts, where accusations, fear, and hysteria left a mark on history, and perhaps on the land itself. The Witch of Salem. A calm, slow, deeply historical and emotional ghost story. Rain continues steadily. Soft, rhythmic, like the quiet tapping of memory against the windows of time. A faint coastal wind rises cool, salty, gentle. Tonight, we travel to one of the most infamous corners of early American history. A place where fear once ruled. Where whispers became weapons. Where innocent lives were destroyed by superstition, panic, and the quiet cruelty of misunderstanding. Salem, Massachusetts. A town forever marked by what happened in 1692. The Salem witch trials. Not a story of magic. Not truly a story of witches at all. But a story of fear, mass hysteria, and the tragic cost of believing that shadows must always hide evil. And among the many spirits said to linger in Salem, one story rises above the rest. Not because it is terrifying, but because it is so deeply human. Tonight, we softly enter the calm, sorrowful presence of the Witch of Salem. Fog, the town that carries its past. Salem today is charming. Cobblestone streets, small shops, colonial houses, with white trim and weathered wood, and the smell of the sea, mixing with autumn leaves. But beneath the charm lies a history heavy with regret. The witch trials lasted only a few months. But in that brief period, more than 200 people were accused, 19 were executed, and one man was pressed to death beneath heavy stones. The fear was impossible to imagine. Children claimed to see shapes. Adults whispered behind closed doors. Neighbors accused neighbors. It was not magic that destroyed the town. It was panic. And from that panic rose a story that still echoes in Salem's quiet nights. The story of a young woman whose innocence was stolen, whose life was cut short, and whose spirit is said to walk softly through the old town when the rain begins to fall. Crescent moon, her name, Abigail. Her name was Abigail Williams, though history painted her harshly as one of the accusers. Legend has softened her into something quieter. In local folklore, she is portrayed not as a villain, but as a young girl confused, frightened, and manipulated by forces far beyond her understanding. Whether she was falsely blamed or truly involved is a question lost to time. But the ghost they speak of is not the Abigail of court records. It is a gentler presence, a lonely figure, wandering the places where fear once ruled. And tonight, we follow her story softly, calmly, as a reminder of what fear can do to a community. Fire, the beginning of the fear. In January of 1692, several young girls in Salem village began experiencing strange fits, trembling, screaming, contorting, and speaking in odd voices. Doctors, unable to explain it, declared the cause witchcraft. Fear spread like wildfire. The first accusations were against vulnerable women, social outcasts, lonely widows, and those who did not fit the strict Puritan mold. Abigail was one of the girls. At the heart of the storm, her fear, real or influenced, changed the fate of the town. And as trials began, with judges stern and unyielding, with ministers urging punishment, with neighbors testifying against each other, Salem transformed from a quiet religious community to a place consumed by whispers and shadows. But legends say that after the trials ended, after the panic faded, Abigail herself was haunted, not by witches, but by guilt. Fog, the ghost of the courtroom. In the old courthouse, where trials once took place. Visitors have reported seeing a faint figure sitting quietly on one of the wooden benches. A young woman in simple colonial clothing, her head bowed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She does not move. She does not speak. She simply sits, as if listening to voices only she can hear. Sometimes she lifts her head slightly, as though trying to follow a testimony long finished. And when someone approaches, her form fades, like candle smoke. Guides and historians, who spend long hours in the old courthouse, claim the air changes before she appears, growing cooler, still, and heavy with a quiet sadness. She is not frightening, not angry, only reflective. A ghost, not of a witch, but of a girl, caught in the middle of a tragedy she couldn't stop. Candle the window at the old meeting house. The old meeting house, where townspeople gathered to pray, and eventually to accuse, is said to be another place where she appears at night. A candle-like glow can sometimes be seen in the top window, even when the building is locked and empty. Witnesses describe a slender silhouette standing behind the glass, resting one hand against the window frame. She seems to look out toward the village square, the place where accused witches were marched toward their trials. No one knows if she is mourning the accused or mourning herself. One local historian believes she returns to that window because it was the place where she once watched the trials unfold. A powerless child, trapped in a storm of adult fear, wind faced the path to Gallows Hill. Gallows Hill is where the executions took place. Today it is calm, a green, quiet slope, with trees moving softly in the coastal wind. But on rainy nights, locals say, you can see a young woman walking the path toward the hill. Her steps are slow, her posture slightly hunched, as if carrying a burden too heavy for her small frame. Some see her holding a single piece of paper, perhaps a testimony, perhaps a list of names, perhaps a symbol of the fear that once gripped Salem. Others describe her pausing halfway up the hill, as if whispering a quiet apology to the spirits of those who died. When lightning flashes, her form becomes clearer. Not a witch, not a vengeful spirit, just a girl, wrapped in loneliness. And then she disappears. As suddenly as she appeared, fogged the sound of a girl crying. The softest and most common experience connected to the Witch of Salem is the sound of crying. Not loud, not violent, just gentle weeping, a quiet sob that carries through the air. On cool, misty nights, visitors walking near the old cemeteries hear it drifting between the gravestones. Nighttime guides, leading groups through the town, pause sometimes, their flashlights flickering just slightly, because they hear a faint, trembling breath beside them. Residents who live in the old colonial houses say the crying appears most often when rain begins to fall, as if the sound of storms brings back memories of the fear that once drowned Salem. Cloud with rain, why her ghost remains. Unlike many ghost stories, the Witch of Salem is not tied to one location. She drifts through the courthouse, where lives were ruined, through the meeting house, where fear began, along the path, where the condemned walked, through the burying grounds, where many were laid to rest, with no proper farewell. Her presence is not filled with anger, not vengeance, not hatred. It is guilt, regret, confusion, the emotions of a young girl who became part of something terrible without fully understanding it. Her spirit, as legend says, remains because she cannot forgive herself. But the people of Salem have tried to forgive for her. Modern memorials honor the victims. Names that were once shamed are now spoken with respect. And in a strange way, the ghost of Abigail, whether real or imagined, has become a symbol of the lesson Salem teaches. Fear is the real witch, and history remembers, so we do not repeat it. Cloud with rain, a calm goodbye to Salem. As the rain continues gently, we leave Salem behind. Its cobblestones, its lanterns, its misty evenings, softly fading. The witch of Salem is not a monster, not a figure of horror. She is a memory, a reminder, a quiet echo of a time when fear overpowered compassion. Her ghost walks, not to frighten, but to reflect, to show that even after centuries, some stories linger, not because of magic, but because of emotion. Tonight, as her gentle presence fades, we prepare for our next journey to a heartbreaking chapter of American history, one involving thousands of children sent across the country in hope, grief, and uncertainty. The ghost children of the orphan train movement. A calm, slow, deeply emotional, boring history ghost story. Rain falls softly. Gentle taps, like tiny fingers on a window, mingled with the slow metallic clinks of an old train in the distance. A soft whistle echoes long, low, mournful. Tonight, we write a different kind of ghost story. Not one tied to a single house, or an abandoned building, or a battlefield. This story stretches across thousands of miles of American rails, through forests, plains, and farmlands, through towns that once watched trains pass, with a mixture of hope and heartbreak. It is the story of children, tens of thousands of them, who boarded trains to find new families. Some found love, some found sorrow, some disappeared into history, without a name to remember them by, and some, so legend says, still ride the tracks. Tonight, we travel gently into the calm yet haunting memory of the orphan trains, and the quiet echoes of children whose footsteps were never heard again. Locomotive. The story begins in New York. In the mid-1800s, New York City was overcrowded, dirty, dangerous. Thousands of children, some orphaned, some abandoned, some simply lost, lived on the streets. They slept under bridges, in alleys, in old doorways. Many begged for food. Many stole to survive. Many never made it through the winter. Reformers decided something had to be done. And so began what historians call the largest mass relocation of children in American history. From 1854 to 1929, an estimated 250,000 children were put on trains and sent west. They were told they would find families, homes, new lives. Some did, but many did not. And from the sorrow and uncertainty of those journeys came stories. Soft, quiet ghost stories, still whispered along the old tracks. Locomotive. The train rides west. The trains were not glamorous. Not like passenger cars. These were basic wooden coaches. Crowded, cold, and filled with frightened children, who clutched small bags containing everything they owned. Some had letters pinned to their clothing with their names. Others had no known identity at all. As the train pulled from New York, people reported hearing the soft, heartbreaking sound of children crying together, a sound heavy with confusion, fear, and hope. The journey could take days, sometimes weeks. The children watched as the city disappeared, and endless fields stretched out before them. Some were excited, some were terrified, some sat silently, staring out the window, with wide, unblinking eyes. And at every small town, the train would stop. People would gather. Children would be examined, chosen, or left behind. Some went to loving families. Others became laborers, farm hands, servants, workers rather than children. And a few simply vanished into the stories of the rails. Fog. The ghost children along the tracks. After the orphan train movement ended in 1929, strange sightings began to be reported along old railway lines. Not frightening, not dramatic, just quietly eerie. People walking near abandoned tracks claimed to hear the soft sound of children's voices, not playing, but whispering. Some said they heard crying late at night, carried on the wind, like a faint echo. Others saw small figures standing near the tracks, pale silhouettes, holding hands, waiting for a train that will never come. Tonight, we listen to these stories, one by one, calmly, softly, with respect for the children whose memories linger. Ghost. The phantom children of the orphan trains. Child 1. The boy on the platform. In Nebraska. At an old wooden platform, now unused and rotting, locals have long spoken of a small boy who appears just after sunset. He wears outdated clothing, suspenders, a wool cap, and boots too big for his feet. He stands alone on the platform, holding a small suitcase with both hands. He does not cry. He does not move. He only watches the horizon, as if waiting for a train he missed long ago. Witnesses say, if you blink, he fades. Not instantly, but slowly, as though his form dissolves into the dusk. Some believe he was a child never chosen, left behind in a town that did not want him. His ghost waits, not for fear, but for belonging. Locomotive 2. The girl in the window. In Kansas, near a stretch of abandoned tracks, a farmer reported seeing the face of a young girl peering out of a train window that wasn't there. He said the image appeared when the wind was strong and the rain had just begun. A blurry reflection of a girl no older than 10, with large, sad eyes and braids falling over her shoulders. She seemed to be pressing her palm against glass that belonged to a train that hasn't run in almost a century. Sometimes she smiles faintly, as if hopeful. Other times, a tear seems to glisten on her cheek. The farmer believes she was separated from her siblings during one of the stops, placed in a home far from the only family she knew. Her ghost, they say, follows the old tracks in hopes of finding them. Busts in Silhouette 3. The children holding hands. In Iowa, late night drivers traveling along a rural road have reported seeing a line of children walking near the railroad crossing. They hold hands, 5 or 6 of them, forming a small chain, as they move quietly along the gravel. Some appear older, some much younger, but all are thin, pale, and wearing simple, outdated clothing. They do not look at the cars. They do not react to noise. They simply walk calmly toward an unseen destination. And then, halfway down the road, they vanish. Some locals believe they are siblings who were separated on the trains and continue searching for each other in death. Others think their bond was so strong that even after death, they walk together. Cloud with Rain 4. The soft knocking at train depots. In Missouri, several small towns still have their original train depots. They are mostly abandoned, quiet, dusty, with old benches and ticket windows, long closed. But workers renovating these buildings reported hearing soft knocking sounds, 3 gentle taps, as though a small hand was asking quietly to be let inside. Sometimes a faint voice follows, a single word, please, or wait. When the workers open the door, no one is there, only an empty platform, and the distant sound of wind moving through grass. These knocks, locals believe, come from the spirits of children who were afraid to board the trains in the first place. Children whose last memory was standing at a depot door, too frightened to take the next step. School Backpack 5. The Lost Luggage. In Oklahoma, a station master once claimed that an old brown suitcase would appear on the platform after a heavy rain. Just for a moment. It was small, child-sized, with a faded name tag that no one could read. He said the suitcase looked soaked, as though carried through a storm. Many decades passed. When he would approach it, the suitcase would vanish, simply blink out of sight. Locals believe it belonged to a child who never reached their destination, a little boy or girl whose belongings remain tied to the spirit that once held them tightly, not haunting out of fear, but out of longing for something familiar. Cloud with Rain. Why the children linger. Ghost children appear in folklore around the world, but the orphan train spirits are different. They do not laugh. They do not run. They do not play tricks. Their presence is quiet, gentle, filled with longing. Many believe they linger because they were separated from siblings. They were never adopted. They felt unwanted. They never found home. They died young, far from anything familiar. The orphan train movement saved many children, but it also created deep emotional wounds. Ghost stories grew, not because of superstition, but because of memory. Communities never forgot the sight of those children stepping off the trains, small hands clutching bags, wide eyes searching faces, hoping to hear someone say, "That one. We choose that one." Some were chosen. Many were not. And it is the ones who carried sorrow the longest, whose spirits still ride the rails. Cloud with Rain. A calm goodbye to the rails. As rain continues softly over the tracks of history, We step back gently. From the Orphan train echoes. We imagine the wooden coaches creaking lightly as they traveled west. We imagine small faces pressed to glass, watching towns blur past. We imagine children searching for family, for safety, for belonging. And we remember that ghosts often linger, not out of anger, but out of longing. Tonight, as the trains grow silent, and the echoes fade, we move toward our next story. A quieter tale. One that unfolds in an old Chicago theater, where a mysterious lady still watches the stage, long after the audience has gone home. Up next, The Gray Lady of Chicago's Old Theater. A calm, slow, elegant, boring history ghost story. Soft rain continues. This time joined by the faint ambience of a grand, empty theater. The hush of velvet curtains. The distant hum of old stage lights cooling. The soft wooden creak of seats settling into silence. Tonight, we step into a place of dim lights and forgotten applause. A space filled with echoes of laughter, music, drama, and dreams. A theater. Not just any theater, but one of Chicago's oldest and most historic performance halls. A place where thousands once gathered to watch stories unfold on stage, to lose themselves in music, to escape their lives, if only for a few hours. And within this elegant, shadowed world, lives a gentle ghost, a spirit known by many names, but most famously as the Gray Lady. She is seen often. She is never harmful. She carries an air of timeless grace, as if she belongs to the stage, more than any living performer ever did. Tonight, we sit quietly in the velvet seats, and let her story unfold softly, like a slow curtain rising. Performing Arts. The Old Theater in the heart of Chicago. Chicago is a city with history in every brick. A city rebuilt after fire. A city of jazz and blues, lights and river bridges, art and architecture. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the city's theaters were icons. Palaces of entertainment, wrapped in velvet and gold leaf, filled with gas lights that flickered like stars. Our story's theater, left unnamed out of respect, was one such place. It opened its doors in the late 19th century, drawing crowds eager for opera, vaudeville, concerts, and eventually early cinema. Inside, the lobby sparkled. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings, painted with scenes of angels and clouds. Marble floors held the footprints of generations of theatergoers. And deep in the auditorium, the velvet seats curved gracefully toward the stage. A place of dreams, where performers gave everything they had for applause. Yet on that stage, in the early 1900s, a tragedy occurred that would give life to the Gray Lady. Fog. Her name, unknown, but her story remains. The Gray Lady's real identity has been lost to time. Some say she was an actress. Others say she was a singer from a wealthy Chicago family. A few legends say she was a dancer whose passion for the stage outlived her body. The story most often told goes like this. She was a performer, young, talented, deeply devoted to her craft. Night after night, she rehearsed on stage, long after others had gone home. She loved the theater, its lights, its curtains, its rows of empty chairs that felt like a silent audience, supporting her dreams. Her big debut was approaching, a performance that would make her a star, a role she had waited her entire life to play. But on the night before her debut, during a late rehearsal, something happened. Some say she slipped from the catwalk. Others say a stage light exploded. Others believe she collapsed from exhaustion and fell from the edge of the stage. Whatever the reason, the result was tragic. She died instantly. The theater mourned her. Her unfinished performance became a ghost story, woven into the velvet curtains and marble halls she loved so dearly. And soon, people began to see her again. The ghostly presence of the Grey Lady. Her spirit appears often, and almost always the same. Calm, graceful, and dressed in a flowing grey gown that moves as though caught in a theatrical spotlight. Her presence is never threatening, never abrupt, never frightening. She is elegant, like a memory that refuses to fade. Tonight, we follow the sightings that made her famous. Performing Arts 1. The balcony vision. Perhaps the most common appearance comes from the upper balcony, the highest, darkest part of the theater, where the seats seem to hold whispers. Ushers closing the theater late at night often look up to see a woman sitting alone in the shadows. Her posture is perfect. Back straight, hands folded in her lap, head tilted slightly, as if listening to music. Her gray dress blends with the dim light, making her appear almost like a mist. When someone calls out to her to tell her the theater is closed, she does not respond. She simply fades, seat by seat, like a soft fog dissolving into darkness. Microphone 2. The song with no singer. Several performers over the last century have reported hearing a woman humming backstage. Not a spooky tune, not eerie, but warm, melodic, like someone warming their voice before a show. The humming moves sometimes near the dressing rooms, along the dark corridors, or behind a heavy curtain. But when anyone follows the sound, they find nothing but cool air and the faint scent of old perfume. One actress claimed she heard the humming grow into a soft voice, a beautiful, ghostly singing that filled the backstage with a calm, haunting melody. She stood frozen, listening to a voice as gentle as a memory, and as sad as the unfinished debut of the woman who died there. When she stepped closer, the voice stopped, but the performer said she felt a hand brush her shoulder, light as silk, not frightening, comforting, almost as if the Grey Lady was wishing her good luck. High-heeled shoe 3. Footsteps on the empty stage. Many stage hands, especially those who work late, have seen footprints appear on the dusty surface of the stage when no one else is present. Soft, delicate footprints, as if someone in small heels walked across the boards just before the curtain rose. Sometimes they hear the footsteps too, the quiet tap-tap of a dancer's shoes moving across the stage. One technician said he saw a shadow spinning, a graceful turn, like a dancer performing a slow pirouette. When he stepped onto the stage, the shadow vanished, but the air felt warmer, as if someone had just been there. Crescent Moon 4. The dressing room mirror. Several performers refused to use the oldest dressing room because of one particular mirror. It's oval-shaped, with an ornate wooden frame, carved with roses. At night, people say you can see a faint outline of a woman's face in the mirror. Not your own reflection, but a second one. Behind your shoulder. Her expression is calm, thoughtful, almost proud, as though she is admiring the person preparing for their performance. Lights flicker gently in the room, never harshly, like someone touching the switch with delicate fingers. And the perfume scent is stronger here, a soft lavender fragrance, long out of fashion. Some performers find it comforting. They say she brings luck to those who respect the stage. Others avoid the room entirely. Admission tickets 5. The Grey Lady who guards the audience. Some witnesses, especially security guards, have seen her standing quietly at the back of the auditorium. She is not looking at the stage, but watching the seats, as though making sure everyone is safe. Before a show begins, her hands rest gently on the velvet railing. Her gaze is soft, full of longing or responsibility. She stays only a moment before dissolving into the aisle's shadows. Perhaps, in her own way, she still feels connected to the audience she never got to perform for. Fog. Why the Grey Lady stays. The Grey Lady does not haunt out of anger, not out of unfinished business, in the frightening sense. Her story is quieter, more artistic, and more emotional. She stays because the theater was her home. The stage was her dream. Her performance was cut short. Her soul belonged to the spotlight. She loved the act of creation. Her presence brings comfort to performers, guidance to nervous actors, and the soft reminder that passion can outlive life itself. Rather than fear, people feel warm when she is near. A ghost, not of sadness alone, but of dedication. A love letter to the art she never finished. Cloud with rain. A calm goodbye to the theater. As the rain continues softly, we let the theater fade into darkness once more. We imagine the Grey Lady standing alone on the stage, a place she loved more than anywhere. The soft spotlight glows faintly around her. She lifts her chin, graceful, elegant, and takes a single step, a step toward the performance she never got to complete. Then she fades into the velvet shadows of the auditorium, leaving only the faint echo of her calm, unending presence. Tonight, we leave her gently behind and prepare for our final ghost story. A story of an island, a prison, and the whispers of those who could never escape. Next, the haunting of Alcatraz Island. A calm, deep, atmospheric boring history ghost story. Final chapter. Soft rain continues. But now, a new ambience rises beneath it. Slow waves brushing against rocky shores. A distant foghorn echoing through ocean mist. And the cold, hollow wind that circles an isolated island. Tonight, we travel to the edge of America's memory. To a place where water surrounds every corner. Where fog rolls in like a living thing. And where silence feels heavy, dense, almost watchful. We go to Alcatraz Island. A name that once meant fear. A prison cut off from the world. A fortress designed for those the country believed were too dangerous to hold anywhere else. Criminals, desperados, desperate souls. But behind the harsh reputation lies something quieter and far more haunting. Stories of footsteps in empty cells, whispers drifting down dark corridors, cold spots that freeze the air, and shadows that move long after the prison closed. Tonight, We enter this lonely place slowly, softly, letting the rain, the waves, and the fog guide us through the calm echoes of Alcatraz Island. Fog, an island cut off from the world. Alcatraz sits in the center of San Francisco Bay, a sharp rock formation, standing in the middle of cold, powerful waters. In the 1800s, it was a military fortress, later, a military prison, and by 1934, it transformed into the most feared federal penitentiary in the country. Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, criminals who had escaped other prisons, were brought here because no one believed escape was possible. The island was small, cold, isolated. Waves crashed endlessly against the rocks. Fog swallowed the buildings for days at a time. And inside the prison walls, the atmosphere was even heavier. Cells only a few feet wide, clanging metal doors, long nights, filled with nothing but your own thoughts. In such a place, it is no surprise that many say the island never forgot what happened there. Here, the prison that breathes with memory. Even after the prison closed in 1963, park rangers, guides, and visitors began to report strange encounters. Footsteps in cell block D, the isolation wing. Whispers in the showers. Cold air drifting through sealed hallways. Figures glimpsed in the corners of one's eye. But the stories are not wild, not exaggerated. They are calm, soft, and filled with an eerie stillness, as if the island itself breathes memories. Tonight, we walk slowly through these stories. The ghosts of Alcatraz. Locked 1. The man in cell 14D. The whole cell block D was the punishment block. Dark, cold, cut off from sunlight. Some prisoners said you could lose your mind in there. Cell 14D was one of the worst. A solitary confinement cell, known as the hole. Visitors and rangers report an overwhelming chill inside the cell, far colder than any other place in the prison. People describe a hand touching their back, a sudden feeling of dread, the sensation of someone standing behind them, a soft, slow breath in the darkness. One common story comes from the 1940s. A prisoner placed in cell 14D began screaming shortly after the door closed. He cried that someone was in the cell with him, a figure with glowing eyes, watching him from the corner. Guards ignored him. Many prisoners complained of things they imagined in the dark. But when morning came, the man was found dead, lying on the floor, a strange expression on his face, and his neck had deep marks, as though from a pair of hands that were never there. Since then, people stepping into cell 14D report a suffocating feeling, not harmful, but heavy, like sorrow pressed into the walls. Some say the prisoner still lingers, caught between fear and silence. Person walking to. Footsteps in the main cell block. In the main cell house, rows of cells stretch endlessly. Metal bars, concrete floors, echoes layered over each other. Many visitors have heard footsteps walking above them, even when the level is empty. Slow, steady steps, as though a guard still makes rounds. Park rangers, locking up late at night, have heard doors clanging from far ends of the block, where no doors exist anymore. One ranger said. He heard a conversation. Two male voices. Talking quietly. As if planning something. When he turned the corner. The voices stopped. Only silence remained. Another ranger. Walking down the main corridor. Felt someone tap his shoulder. When he turned. No one was there. He described the feeling. Not as frightening. But as like someone asking. If I'm still awake. Fog 3. The cry in the showers. The old shower room. Is one of the most echoing spaces. On the island. Visitors stepping inside. Have reported hearing. Soft crying. Dripping that isn't water. The faint echo of voices. Speaking under their breath. Some hear. A single man crying quietly. A low, shaking sob. Coming from the far corner. Others hear. A shifting sound. Like bare feet on wet concrete. One guide. Closing up at night. Swore she saw steam rising. From the showers. Even though the water. Had been disconnected for decades. She heard. A short breath. Right next to her ear. Not fear. Not aggression. Just a presence. That felt lonely. Bust in silhouette 4. The shadow man of cell block C. This is one of the calmest. Yet most frequently reported sightings. A tall shadow figure. Seen walking. Along the upper tier of cell block C. Sometimes he stops. And looks down. At visitors below. A dark silhouette. With no facial features. He does not move quickly. He does not threaten. He simply stands. Some say. He was a notorious inmate. Others think. He was a guard. Who never stopped watching the cells. A few believe. He represents the collective memory. Of all who died here. A single shape. Holding the stories of many. Lights flicker. When he appears. Air grows cooler. And those who witness him. Describe feeling something. Not like fear. But like being observed. By someone long gone. Coin 5. The music room piano. Alcatraz once had. A small recreation area. Including a music room. Where inmates could learn instruments. The piano remains. Old, dusty. Slightly out of tune. Visitors walking past the room. Have reported hearing. A single piano note. Just one. Sometimes it is low and soft. Other times. It is a high, gentle note. That echoes down the hallway. Like a forgotten memory. Rangers say. The sound often appears. In the early morning. When the island is quietest. As if someone sits briefly. At the piano. Before fading away again. Some believe. A prisoner who once played. Still visits the instrument. In moments of calm. Fog why the ghosts remain. Alcatraz was not just a prison. It was a place of endings. Endings of freedom. Endings of hope. Endings of identity. For some. Even endings of life. The island carries. Layers of emotion. Fear, frustration, longing, regret. Those emotions. Are said to cling. To the walls. The floors. The doors. And the air itself. People do not report. Violent hauntings here. No angry screams. No loud terrors. Instead. The ghosts of Alcatraz. Are quiet. Reflective. Lonely. They move. As if repeating routines. They once lived. A guard walking rounds. A prisoner pacing a cell. A musician touching piano keys. A man in solitary. Sitting in silence. Their presence. Is less haunting. and more like echoes of a place that holds memories too deep to release. Cloud with rain, a calm goodbye to Alcatraz. As rain continues softly over the cold stone of Alcatraz, we walk slowly back toward the ferry dock. We imagine the fog rolling in, the waves crashing gently below, and the distant city lights of San Francisco glimmering across the water. The island grows quiet as we leave it behind, its ghosts settling into the calm darkness they know so well. Alcatraz is no longer a prison. It is a museum, a landmark, a reminder of human isolation and the cost of being forgotten. And just like the stories we have told tonight, its ghosts remain, not to scare, but to remind us of the lives that once moved through its halls. With this final story, our long journey through boring history ghost tales comes to a peaceful end.